She finally spoke out just before she died. For 10 years, the former Graceland Maid was close with Elvis Presley. Fans were shocked by what she said. It was over 40 years ago that Nancy Rooks kept the king's secret safe by not talking about what really happened at Graceland. But now her last words are in the news. She said, "It's time to tell everything." What came next wasn't the warm farewell that people were hoping for. Before she died, the former maid at Graceland finally told the truth about Elvis. It's not good. What did she see? Why did she not say anything for so long? How things are in Graceland. Nicole Rooks saw Elvis Presley as a person before everyone else did. She didn't meet him in a place with bright lights or a packed house. She yawned and met him in the kitchen in pajamas, asking if there was any bacon left. She was hired to clean and cook at Graceland in 1967. Her job quickly changed into something much more personal, though. Over the years, she became a regular part of Elvis's private life. She saw everything, from intimate breakfasts to angry rants that happened behind closed doors. Graceland was more than just a house. It was a jumble of feelings. Elvis would pace through the halls at 2 a.m. some days, quiet and deep in thought. On other days, the house would be filled with music, and Nancy would join him in the kitchen and sing. His favorite kind of music was gospel. He would happily sing, "How Great Thou Art," and smile when Nancy joined in. With a towel in one hand and a pan in the other. Everyone knew who he was, but to her, he was just Mr. Elvis. He always said, "Thank you," and "Please." Nancy will never forget that. In the end, she would say that he was raised right. They were always polite to her, even when things were crazy, like when the phone kept ringing non-stop or when people kept coming and going. That didn't mean life at Graceland was easy, though. Nancy worked strange hours, often late at night, to accommodate Elvis's unpredictable schedule. If he got up at 3 a.m., she was there with her apron on, ready to make bacon, biscuits, or sweet potato pie for anyone who asked. She did a lot more than just clean. He wore his pants while she helped him with them sometimes. She put his clothes out, put his personal things in order, set up his pool area, and got used to living in a place where day and night often blended together. The life of Elvis was not normal at all. Nancy got used to it without complaining, but no one knew what she saw. She wrote a book called Inside Graceland years later. One of Elvis's maids remembers. There was love, fun, and soft-spoken memories in it. Never make a fuss or pass judgment. But she still kept some things from them. In quiet conversations, she said this. She promised to keep some things to herself for as long as she could because she didn't think the world was ready to hear them. Not out of fear, but because they love you. Still, her fans were waiting for every word she said. They were interested in what Elvis wore, what he ate, and how he acted when the cameras were off. Nancy told just the right amount of information to keep people interested while also keeping the man behind the myth safe. She would remember how clean he was and how he often took several showers a day. She would also remember how he liked his bacon fried hard and his eggs scrambled just right. And she would remember how his eyes always looked around the room like he was looking for something he couldn't quite name. But the important thing Nancy gave the world wasn't a small thing. It was about perspective. Elvis became a person again through her stories. It wasn't an icon, a joke, or a disaster. A man who cried, laughed, and ate too much. He also didn't want to talk to anyone for hours at a time. A well-known person who kept a small group of close friends. And Nancy Rooks had a quiet but important place in that group. She never tried to be the center of attention. But that changed as her time ran out near the end of her life. She made it sound like there were more facts to tell. Some parts of the story she had kept secret. It's time to tell everything, she said. 0. People who knew her well started to wonder. What did she carry around for so long? What did she see in her last days that she chose to bury? In the early hours of August 16, 1977. Or at least it looked like any other morning when it began. Like always, Elvis had been up late. At the end of the night, or early morning of August 16, 1977, he played racquetball with Ginger Alden, his fiancée, and his cousin Billy Smith. She was already in the kitchen when he came back into Graceland. He stood there on the steps, tired but always polite, she remembered. Like she always did, she gave him food. "No, I don't want anything to eat right now," Elvis said. "I just want to sleep, but first I'd like to drink some water." At the time, Nancy didn't think much of it. That night was hot, and he had just been busy. Pauline, another maid, was sent upstairs with a jug of ice water. The kind that orange juice used to come in and had a handle. It wasn't a big deal, it was just another quiet conversation in a house full of them. But Pauline still thought something was wrong. Elvis grabbed the jug and drank a lot of water very quickly. Afterward, she said, "I never knew him to grab that water and drink it like he did this morning." Nancy did not care about it. "I think he's just tired from racquetball," she said. But the moment stayed with her in the back of her mind. Nancy heard a big thump from upstairs around 9:30 a.m. It wasn't really a crash, but something didn't feel right. She stopped, waited, and listened, but there were no screams, calls for help, or other sounds of chaos. There was only quiet. The kind of quiet that you tell yourself doesn't mean anything. She then went on with her work. It wasn't until almost 1:50 p.m. that the phone rang. Ginger's speech was very shaky and hard to understand. New York was scared and asked, "Who's down there? Something bad has happened up here." She asked, "What is it?" Ginger then began to cry. At that point, Nancy knew it wasn't something small. It wasn't broken glass or a fall. There was a big problem. When she dropped the phone, she ran up the steps, her heart beating fast with each step. She went down the hall and into the changing room. Elvis was lying face down on the bathroom floor, not moving. "Oh my God," she said in a low voice. She didn't scream when she asked, "What is this?" She wasn't frozen. The Memphis Mafia were waiting for her when she ran back downstairs. It was important for everyone to know quickly. But as they realized what was going on, chaos slowly took its place. It was time for the ambulance. A lot of people became scared. No, Nancy didn't. The doctors didn't even know how to get around Graceland when they got there. Nancy walked with them and showed them how to carry the stretchers up the stairs and around the hallway's sharp corners. She led them by showing them the way. She saw Elvis one last time when they finally caught him. In the end, she said, he looked like he was asleep, but he had already died. His face had blue spots. After that, things moved quickly. Lots of people, sirens, and news cars. It was sad that Elvis Presley had died. She had lost Mr. Elvis, though, the guy who once asked her to sew up his pants while he laughed. She stayed out of the way while the story made news all over the world. The official word was heart attack. Not a thing more or less. But there were still some things that didn't feel right. Around the room, people talked about pill boxes, dates, and what really happened in the hours after Elvis drank that water until Nancy found him on the bathroom floor. She didn't say anything at the time, she just held it in. Let the officials take care of what they need to do. But many years later, she would go back to that morning again. She wasn't going to stop after seeing what she did this time. She would talk about what she thought, what she felt bad about, and what she might have hid without realizing it. The lies she told for many years. Nance Rooks didn't say anything for years after Elvis died. Not because she didn't have anything to say, she did, but because you didn't cross certain lines. No way in Memphis. Not when someone like Elvis Presley had a big impact on your life. Fans had come from all over the world just to stand at the gates of Graceland. She had seen people cry when they talked about the king, like they had lost a brother, a friend, or a friend. Nancy knew that sadness. Maybe that's why she decided to be quiet for a while instead of letting people guess. But sometimes quiet is enough to say a lot. After Elvis died, Nancy kept working for the Presley family. She worked with the owners to turn Graceland from a house into a museum. But there was one part of the house that no one, not even guests or reporters, went into. Elvis's private room on the second floor. Nancy said that the bathroom and bedroom were only cleaned once or twice a month to keep the dust away. It was an unspoken rule. There should be no loitering, questions, or comments. You clean, then you leave. But something changed in her every time she walked through those rooms. She looked at the same floor, hall, and bathroom at the end of it all. And every time she wiped down a surface or folded a shirt, the morning would come back to her. She talked about it in public very little and not in detail. In the 1990s, she finally wrote a book called Inside Graceland, Elvis's Maid Remembers. It was full of kindness and memories. A lot of funny stories were told about his favorite foods, music, and odd hours. But the last part, which was the one everyone really wanted to hear, was strangely vague. That was enough for most people. But people who knew Nancy well saw points, little points, hints. When certain things came up in talks, she would pause. Her eyes would wander. People say she told them, if people knew what I know, they'd never hear his music the same way again. It wasn't a threat. It was a weight. As the years went by, more questions came up. Why did people have so much trouble figuring out when Elvis died? Why did several prescription bottles seem to be taken away from the scene before the police arrived? Why did so many changes have to be made to the lab report before it was made public? Also, why did people who were there, like Nancy, never fill in those blanks? The truth is that she had tried in secret and softly. A few close friends said she had told them things over the years, but always asked them to keep them secret. She said that the Memphis Mafia didn't want the cops to look around in that bathroom because there were things that shouldn't have been there and Ginger was too upset to explain. In fact, one story says that Nancy was told to clean up before the rescuers got there, but she never said that herself. But time made her weak. Not out of anger. Nancy wasn't angry, but she was stressed. And when she was older and was told she had health problems, something changed. I did my duty for the family, but I think someday before I go, the truth needs to be told, she said in an interview just a year before she died. People always thought Nancy told the truth in her memoir, but what if the most important thing she didn't say was the most important thing she did? What if she saw more that morning than she ever admitted? What if her silence wasn't just loyalty, but guilt? Because years after Elvis's death, NY's last words started to sound less like a fond memory and more like a call to action. She worked her whole life to honor the man she worked for, but near the end, she hinted that keeping his legacy alive might have meant hiding some of the truth, which she wasn't sure was the right thing to do. This was her last confession. Before she died in 2022, Nancy Rook said something quiet but shocking. There was no press release or loud announcement from her. That wasn't her style. But people who really knew her say that in her last few months, something changed. She became more thoughtful and direct, and then one day she said the words that no one thought she would say from the woman who had kept Elvis's secrets for over 40 years. People around her didn't understand what she meant at first, but it became clear that she was finally ready to let go, not for attention or drama, but for peace. Nancy had always stood up for Elvis in public. She told the sweet stories, the funny memories, and the everyday things that made fans feel closer to him. There was something she didn't talk about, something she kept to herself, that she thought happened in those last days. One friend said Nancy told them that Elvis wasn't as well as everyone thought in the weeks before he died. He was having a hard time, and she said he was tired. He was tired of the medicine and the act. Nancy went on to say that some of the medicines Elvis was taking weren't even prescribed for him or were being passed around by people close to him without proper supervision. She said she saw new bottles in the trash almost every day that summer and that Elvis had fallen asleep in strange places, like in the middle of a conversation, a meal, or even a sentence. She thought at the time that it was just exhaustion, but now she was afraid it was something much worse. Nancy also talked about something she had never talked about in public, what happened right after Elvis was found on the bathroom floor. As always, Nancy rushed upstairs when Ginger Alden called downstairs crying and saying something bad had happened. She froze when she saw Elvis's body lying face down and not moving. Her instincts took over, and she ran back down to call the Memphis Mafia. But before the ambulance arrived, someone, Nancy never said who, told her to clean up a bit. She let them, and she did. She wiped down a counter, moved a towel, and put some things in order. It seemed like a harmless task. Later, when the media storm started and questions about pills and timelines came up, she realized what she might have done. "I didn't know what I was covering up," she reportedly said. "I just did what I was told." These moments, the water he drank too quickly, the thump she heard that morning, the brief attempt to clean up the scene, had been bothering her. People who knew her well say that in the last few months of her life, she wasn't so sure. That's when she told someone the thing she never wrote out loud in her book, the thing that changed everything: Elvis didn't just die, he faded. And no one stopped it. That line stuck, which is why those close to her say she seemed burdened in her last days. She didn't help protect Elvis by what she did, but by what she didn't say. Did she help protect the people who let him get away? With those words, it's time to tell everything. The conversation has changed because the former Graceland maid finally told the truth about Elvis before she died. Not because he was a bad person, but because the people around him may have let him down. Because there were signs, and Nancy, in her quiet way, had seen too many of them and spent too long pretending she hadn't. The aftermath that no one saw coming. When word got out that Nancy Rooks had left behind more than just a cookbook and some warm memories, people didn't react right away. It came on slowly, like how she always moved through Graceland, aware, present, but never loud. But when people realized what she had said, or at least hinted at, shock began to spread. Fans were split. Some wouldn't believe it. To them, NY's memoir was gospel, simple, loyal, and not controversial. But now that same loyal housekeeper was being quoted as saying Elvis didn't just fall down, he faded. What's worse, she might have helped clean up the scene in a way that made it easier for the police. The idea that someone close to Elvis had tampered with evidence, even if they didn't mean to, stoked old wounds. Even though the official cause of death was a sudden heart attack, there was always room for doubt. The mix of drugs he was on, the delay in calling 911, and the lack of a full, unredacted toxicology report were all brought up again with new anger. Online forums were filled with rumors. Longtime Elvis fans and biographers quickly re-evaluated the events. Had Nancy really been told to clear things up? What had she seen that morning? Why hadn't she come forward sooner? And who, if anyone, had told her not to? Others, on the other hand, praised her. They saw her late-life honesty as a brave act. She had spent decades protecting Elvis's legacy. Maybe she realized that telling the truth and showing respect for the past could go hand in hand. Fans should know that Elvis wasn't immortal, and that even kings fall apart, sometimes slowly, sometimes in silence, and often with the help of people who are too afraid to step in. The Presley estate didn't say anything. Graceland kept giving tours, selling merchandise, and playing music, but behind the scenes, people who knew Nancy said that things felt different now. They said that a line had been crossed not out of betrayal, but out of love for the man who had called them family. For Nancy, there was no media tour, no interviews, and no best-selling story. There were just a few words said softly and passed along by people she trusted. She didn't have to blame anyone or name names, all she had to do was tell the truth. And that, it turned out, was enough to change how people saw Elvis's life and death, not just as a tragedy, but as a slow falling apart that too many people saw but no one dared to stop. Nancy Rooks lived her life in the background, but when she died, her voice finally came to the fore. The weight of what she left behind. In the end, Nancy Rooks didn't leave behind scandal. She left behind questions, quiet, heavy questions that stay with you long after the headlines are gone. She didn't want to ruin anyone's legacy, especially Elvis's. What she really wanted was to protect the man she knew, the one who sang gospel in the kitchen and asked for his bacon crispy. But the truth can get into even the best-kept stories. Nancy never said she had all the answers. She wasn't a detective or a doctor. She worked as a maid, a cook, and a witness to something bigger than herself. But that's what made her voice important. She didn't have to lie or make things up, her truth had weight because it was based in reality. And when she finally said, "It's time to tell everything," no, she wasn't blaming anyone. She was just saying that silence can feel like betrayal sometimes, even when it's meant to be kind. Nancy thought she was honoring Elvis by keeping some things to herself for years, but as she got older, she realized that honoring someone doesn't mean acting like everything was fine. When she died, she left behind a complicated picture of Elvis and the world he lived in, a world where people were afraid to question routines and where even the loudest voices around him didn't always speak up when it mattered most. Fans who thought they knew the whole story were given a new layer to think about. No, Nancy didn't reveal a secret plot. Instead, she showed what it's like to live after someone else's fall, to feel guilty for things you didn't stop, even if you didn't fully understand them at the time. NY's final thoughts weren't a new image for Elvis, they were a reminder that legends are people, just like the people who work for them. That grief can turn into silence, and that silence can last for decades, and that sometimes telling the truth isn't about exposing someone, it's about freeing yourself from a story you've had to carry alone for too long. Nancy is gone. The woman who folded his shirts, brought him water that last morning, and showed the paramedics the way upstairs isn't here to clarify or explain anymore, but her voice can still be heard in quiet admissions, unfinished sentences, and the decision to speak up just once before the end. Do you think Nancy Rooks waited too long to speak out? Or was her final statement the only way to truly honor the man she never stopped protecting?